نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh Al-Maram من أدلة الأحكام by Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani عليه رحمة الله تعالى, and we'll be continuing discussing what we had started in the last session, where we started discussing a new chapter that the author entitled Taflis wal Hajr. So discussing matters regarding the person who falls into bankruptcy and what are the ahkam that pertains to certain situation. So today we'll read two hadith and cover two hadith in this particular chapter. The first of those hadith, the hadith of Omar ibn Sharid and Abihi al-Hadith. Then also the second hadith, the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhum jami'an. So the hadith will be read, and then we'll go through regarding the normal procedures regarding takhrij and also the ahkam that can be taken from the hadith. Naam.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Hadith number 728, narrated Amr ibn Sharid and Abihi, that he mentioned on his father, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, delay in payment on the part of one who possesses the means makes it lawful to dishonor and punish him. Abu Dawood and An-Nasa'i reported it, and Al-Bukhari reported it as mu'allaq, and Ibn Hibban graded it as authentic. The following hadith 729, narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, in the time of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a man suffered loss affecting fruits he had bought, owed a large debt, and became bankrupt. So Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to the people, give him sadaqah. Hence the people gave charity. However, that was not enough to repay his debt in full. Therefore Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to the creditors, take whatever you find, and you will have nothing other than that. Reported by Muslim.
So those are two hadith that the author have mentioned in this chapter regarding taflis of the person who fall into bankruptcy. So the hadith that he mentioned first, so the hadith, as we will state the hadith and have the discussion around this hadith, the first of those hadith that is mentioned that he mentioned of those hadith is mentioned an Amr ibn Sharid and Abihi قال رسول الله عليه السلام لي الواجد يحل إرضه وعقوبته. رواه أبو داود والنسائي وعلقه البخاري وصححه ابن هبان. The second hadith that he mentioned, and Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu قال أصيب الرجل في عهد رسول الله عليه السلام في ثمار ابتاعها فكثرت دينه فقال رسول الله عليه السلام تصدقوا عليه فتصدق الناس عليه ولم يبلغ ذلك وفاء ديني فقال رسول الله عليه السلام لغرمائه خذوا ما وجدتم وليس لكم إلا ذاك. رواه Muslim. So these are the hadith that we'll be discussing today bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So the first of those hadith that we'll cover, so we'll cover each hadith concerning that, each of them separately, and then so each of them separately. So as for the first of these two hadith that we'll be covering, as you mentioned here, and Amr ibn Sharid and Abihi, we mentioned that Amr ibn Sharid, upon his father, that he mentioned the hadith that is stated here. So as for the first thing that we'll cover regarding takhrij of the hadith, so the first of those things that are mentioned regarding this particular hadith that they mentioned regarding concerning that the Prophet ﷺ, that he states on this hadith where he mentioned Rawahu Abu Dawood wa Nasahi wa allaqahu al-Bukhari wa sahahu Ibn Hibban. So as for this particular hadith that is mentioned, which is the hadith of Sharid, so the hadith of Sharid al-Thaqafi, al-Sahabi, that they mentioned that he was from Adramaut, and that so Adamat, but also of those who were involved in Al-Bay' al-Ridwan with the Prophet ﷺ. So this is concerning his hadith. So his hadith are found in Bukhari Mu'allakan and also in Abd al-Mufrad and other books of hadith. So as for what is mentioned regarding concerning this hadith, Layul Wajid, they mention Layul Wajid. So with the hadith mentioned Rawahu Abu Dawud wa Nasahi wa allaqahu al-Bukhari wa sahahu Ibn Ibn. So as for the tahqiq of the hadith here, that Sheikh Mahir Al-Fahl in his tahqiq of the book or checking of this book, when he stated or mentioned this hadith, he mentioned the hadith that he says that in the hadith akhrajahu, that he stated the hadith in the Ibn Abi Shayba in his Musannaf, Ahmad, Bukhari, Mu'allakan, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, Nasa'i, Tahawi in his book Shar al-Mushkil, then also Ibn Hibban or Bayhaqi. So this hadith, it can be found in these references as books of hadith. Ibn Abi Shayba in his Musannaf, Ahmed in his Musnad, Bukhari in his Sahih, but by way of Mu'allakan, with a not Mu'allakan, Abu Dawud in his Sunan, Ibn Majah, Nasahi in their Sunan, also At-Tahawi in his book, Ashar, Mushkil, Ibn Hibban in his Sahih, wal Bayhaqi. So the hadith can be found in these sources. He mentioned there, so the ulama, they concern this particular hadith, that they mentioned this hadith, that a discussion between the ulama regarding this hadith, where they mentioned that in this particular hadith, that he mentioned that in the isnad of this hadith, there's a narrator who's Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Maymun. So in this isnad of this hadith, that there's a narrator who's Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Maymun. We have some discussion between the ulama regarding this particular narrator. So different things that are said about him regarding this particular narrator, but overall, that they mentioned regarding that in this particular narration, that they state regarding that Ibn Hibban all him regarding Muhammad ibn Maymun, that to be one who said to be one who's thiqa. So wathaqahu Ibn Hibban. Also it is mentioned by Al-Dhahabi where it state ma rawahu anhu illa rabwa. So it mentioned regarding that the only person that narrates upon him is one said to be wabra. Then it is mentioned called Ali ibn Madini. So Ibn Madini, he states regarding this person, majhul. Lam yari anhu illa wabra. That Ali ibn Madini, he states that this person is unknown and that none narrates upon him except for wabra. Then Ibn Hajar, alayhi rahmatullah ta'ala, he mentioned regarding this person, it is maqbul. So Ibn Hajar, regarding Muhammad ibn Maymun, that he mentioned wa maqbul. And it is stated regarding that Dhakra Bukhari, wa Ibn Abi Hatim, that is mentioned, Imam Bukhari have mentioned him, and also Ibn Abi Hatim, will mention, and they state, lam yadhkur fihi jarhan wa la ta'adilan. That Bukhari, Ibn Abi Hatim, that have mentioned this particular person in their books, but they did not state anything regarding him, regarding those who have any type of ta'dil of him, those who have praised him, nor those who have critiqued him or said things which is things against him. So nothing for or against this particular narrator. Then as we state that Imam Bukhari, alayhi rahmatullah ta'ala, mentioned in his book, in his Sahih, Mu'allakan, with they mention Mu'allakan with Sigat al-Tamrid. So they mention called Yadhkur an-Nabi alayhi salam, that they mentioned that, and it is stated by him upon the Prophet alayhi salam. So they mention Sigat al-Tamrid, that regarding this particular narration. So Mu'allakan of Sahih Bukhari, where Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, that he skipped some of the narrators and go straight to someone later on. So Imam Bukhari, he skipped those who are close to him of his shuyukh, or those close to him, and go straight to someone who's more further away from him. So it mentioned regarding concern that Ibn Hajar mentioned that this particular hadith in his book Talkhis al-Habir, that he mentioned that isnaduhu hasan, and also mentioned ذكره الطبراني أنه لا يروي بغير هذا وذكره الطبراني أنه لا يروي بغير هذا إسناد. So also, so Ibn Hajar ul hadith to be hasan. Also stated that Ibn Malakin in his book Badr al-Munir, that he graded this hadith as sahih. And so that's concerning the ulama, that regarding what they have stated regarding this particular hadith. So also Al-Hakim, he called concerning hadith sahih isnad, that Al-Hakim all concerned that that hadith it is sahih. So the ulama, they're between regarding the hadith being sahih and those who said the hadith is hasan, but because of this narrator that we mentioned, that we state concerning that his name is Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Maymun, that because of some discussion regarding him and not enough information, that of those who mentioned the hadith is actually Hassan. That is hadith is Hassan, as stated by Ibn Hajar, that the hadith is Hassan as in the book Fath al-Bari. Then so that's concerning this particular hadith, regarding the hadith being said to be Hassan by way of what the ulama have stated regarding hadith. And also you find that Sheikh Albani and also of contemporaries and also Sheikh Shuaib al-Nahut all the hadith to be Hassan. So Sheikh Shuaib al-Nahut and also Sheikh Albani of contemporaries, of the ulama of contemporary time, that they have graded this particular hadith as Hassan. So regarding concerning hadith, what they mentioned, what is stated regarding this first hadith, that they mentioned that what the Prophet said, Layul Wajid. So Layul Wajid, that the ulama mentioned, they mentioned that Layul Wajib, they mentioned At-Talal wa Taswif. Or Taswif, we are a person that know that they delay, procrastinate in doing of something. So a person who delay, procrastinate, that they will postpone doing of something, that they mentioned, concerned that they mentioned Layul Wajid. So Wajid, they mentioned that is the person who he has the ability. So the person has the ability to pay his debt, but he delay doing so. So the Prophet said, Layul Wajid, that means concern the person who delays paying of his debt and is capable of doing so. That he mentioned that yuhil yani yujawiz, or that it becomes yubiyah, that it becomes permissible, irdahu, regarding concerning for someone to complain about him to those in authority. So they mentioned that from this it shows concerning yujawiz, it is allowed for the person that is not paying or giving them their right, that such a person that they can go to the hakim and complain to this person. They can complain to this person that the person not fulfilling their rights, are not giving them what they're deserving. So the person that is allowed then to make a complaint to about this person. Then it mentioned uqubatuhu, and also is uquba, that they mentioned that the person can be punished. This person that he can be punished. Of the thing that is cited by of the ulama like Abu Dawood, when he cited this hadith, that he mentioned the ulama have stated regarding that this person, regarding that, he can be punished for delaying paying of the person. So he mentioned that the person can be punished for this delay, as stated by some of the stated by the ulama. So from this hadith that have been mentioned, that of the ahkam that can be taken from this first hadith. So from the ahkam that can be taken from this first hadith, that they have mentioned regarding this particular hadith, that they mentioned that this person can be punished. So from the first hadith, that of the masahil that can be taken from this particular hadith, but so that's concerning that as for this particular hadith, that they mentioned of the hadith of the masail that can be taken, that of the masail they discussed concerning uqubat, that the person who has the ability, the person who's wealthy, has the ability, but he is procrastinating, delaying in paying of his debt. So the person who has a debt to others, to someone, but he has the ability to pay the person, but he is delaying, postponing, giving the person what he's deserving. So as a hukum, or what to be done in that case, they mentioned, they find that it go into 4 things that a person can do. So there's like 4 things that could be done to such a person, who as a form of punishment for them delaying paying of their debt, or paying the person back what they're deserving. So they mentioned that the ulama, they said there's no khilaf. Regarding the ulama, they mentioned that la khilaf bain ahli al-ilm, that there's no difference between the ulama, anna man kana ghaniyan, that the one who's wealthy, qadiran ala ada dayni, that the one who's wealthy and is able to pay his debt, famtana, and then he wish not to pay, then he wish not to pay, is the mention فَإِنَّ لِصَاحِبِ الْحَقِّ أَنْ يَرْفَ أَمْرَهُ إِلَى الْحَاكِمِ, that the person then who wishes not to pay his debt, but is able, so he chooses not to pay his debt and he's able, that I mentioned, there's an agreement between the ulama that that person, his case can be raised to the hakim, yani to the judge. So to the person that his case can be brought to the judge. Then I mentioned that because of him delaying paying of his debt, and that is a form of oppression to others. This is a form of oppression that he's doing or wrong that he's doing to others. So his case can be raised to the judge. Then I mentioned that as for the judge, if the matter is raised to the judge, that the hakim, that ya'maruhu, the hakim could command him, force him, command that he should pay off his debt because he's able. So the hakim, the first procedure with the hakim with that, he will force this person that he must instruct the person that you must pay your debt. Then I mentioned that, so that's the first step of the hakim, force him that he must go and pay his debt. فَإِنْ imtana, if the person then he still withholds of paying off this debt, he still choose not to pay off his debt, then I mentioned that then the hakim, the second step the hakim concerning that he can imprison him. Habasahu, that the hakim, if he command him to pay his debt, instruct him to pay his debt, but then the person still doesn't comply, then the hakim, in this, the second step of the hakim of the judge, is that he can imprison him. He can have this person to be imprisoned, and that's the call taken by Jumhur of the ulama. So the second step is the person being imprisoned, restriction placed on the person. They mention that the judge can do so, and that is allowed for the judge, and that is the view taken by Jumhur of the ulama, and that's called Raja, that the judge can imprison that person for doing so and put the person under restriction until hatta yu'addi ma'alayhi, until he pays his debt. So he's in prison, restriction is put upon the person regarding his movements until he's able, until he pays his debt. And they mention that because this is what the person is doing of delaying paying off his debt, what he do is a munkar, is an evil, and wajaba al-hakim, it becomes no compulsory upon the hakim that he should change that circumstance, make al-inkar, and change that circumstance which is which is that person, then restriction should be placed on that person, and it could mean in the form of the person being imprisoned or placed on, we said today, house arrest, or that type of restriction until the debt is paid. They mention it also the person regarding concern of these cases, in this such a case, that also the person then still after imprisonment, asar al adam al ada, the person still does not wish to pay his debt. The person after being imprisoned, the person now is still insisting on not paying off his debt. They mention the hakim in this case can darabahu, he can ask that this person, that he can be punished. This person, a form of punishment or ta'zir, can be placed on this individual for still not wishing to pay his debt after those steps have been taken of the person being commanded. He still withhold from doing this. Then the judge imprison him. He still wish not to pay his debt. The third step of the judge is that person could be punished. So a form of punishment could be put on this person by a darb. The person is flogged or something which is suitable. So the judge, he can have a form of punishment as he deemed to be suitable, as a form of ta'zir, as a form of punishment upon this individual. Within that, what I meant to mention, that which is within that which is allowed within the Sharia. So a form of ta'zir. So that which is allowed within the Sharia as a form of punishment that is suitable, as allowed in the Sharia to be carried out by the judge. So they mentioned that, and it is stated regarding that, that Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned regarding concerning it, وَهَذَا مِمَّا لَا نِزَاءَ فِيهِ, that there's no difference between the ulama on this matter, regarding that the third step of the hakim, of the judge, is that person that is to be a form of punishment to be carried out on that person. Then I mentioned that فَإِنْ أَسَرْ, but then a person after being punished is still insisting he's not paying that debt. He's not paying, but he has the ability. So he has the ability. Then they mentioned the fourth procedure for the judge. Ba al-hakim, the judge, he can sell the person's property or thing that he owes and use this to pay off his debt. So the first, the third, the fourth procedure, the fourth step, and the final step is that the judge will then, the court would sell off of that person's asset, some of his assets, to pay his debt. So his asset will be sold, and this will be used, or his belongings, his property will be sold, and this will be, and what is taken, what is gained from this, it will be used to pay his debt and those that he owes, because the person, he has the ability. So they mentioned that, that is of what can be applied. So these are the 4 procedures that can be applied regarding the person who, a form of punishment for the person who delay paying off his debt, postpone paying off his debt, put off paying off his debt. First procedure, that the matter is raised to the judge will command him for that he must pay his debt. If he does not comply, the second step is that the judge can have him imprisoned. The third procedure, the judge can have the person be punished at what he deemed to be suitable punishment for this case. And the fourth procedure, the fourth step, is that the person that is property of his belongings, some of it is sold so as to pay off his debts. So that's concerning the akuba. As the hadith, as then it mentioned that lay al-wajib yuhil irdahu, that the person can raise the case to the judge or to the courts, and for them to take the appropriate procedure mentioned, wa uqubatuhu, and also he could be punished for this. So a punishment could be put upon the person who delay paying off his debt. Then they mention after this that of the masail they discuss concerning that, إذا دعا إفلاس, if a person makes a claim that he is bankrupt, a person who makes a claim that there's bankrupt, ولم يأتي بالبينة, but he hasn't brought forth any form of proof of what he's claiming. So one claimed bankruptcy, but he's not bringing forth any form of legitimate, valid proof to show that that's actually his case and his situation. So they mentioned that as sahih alayhi jumhur ulama. So what is mentioned that jumhur of the ulama, that the hakim, the person making such claim, but hasn't yet produced any form of evidence that is bankrupt, then what could be done? That the judge, when if the matter is raised to the judge, then the judge will raise the matter and put and ask that one, if the person, those that he owes, if they are saying that that's untrue, that they are going against what he's claiming. So if they are going against what he's claiming, that he's bankrupt, the one claiming bankruptcy, the people that he owes are saying that's not the case. He's not bankrupt. Then the judge, what he can do, and the person halafa, the person swear that this person who is claiming bankruptcy is not. He's not bankrupt, and the matter is raised. Then the court make a halif in that case, and he's saying that that person is still as wealth, he's still wealthy, but he's claiming bankruptcy falsely. Then it mentioned that the judge, then he would imprison that the one who's claiming bankruptcy until he's able to bring sufficient evidence and proof that he's actually bankrupt. So he'll be imprisoned, locked up, until he can bring sufficient evidence to prove that he's actually bankrupt. And it mentioned that, or that he's broke. So bring proof that you're actually bankrupt or you're broke and cannot pay your debts. And so that's concerning the ulama I've mentioned. So that's concerning the procedure taken by the judge. And also it doesn't mean that if he's in prison or locked up, that the judge will still give him time for him to go out and bring those evidence. So the judge will still be lenient and allow the person that you can go and get your evidence and then come back. So he'll be given that respite for him to bring his evidence. So the evidence could be by way of shuhud, that he brings that the shuhud as evidence. So the person, he could be locked up if he makes this claim, unless he bring the proof that he's actually bankrupt. Then I mentioned that, so that's concerning of that matter. So he'll bring his evidence, which is either some form of proof, legitimate proof, that he's actually broke or bankrupt. The next of the matter that they discuss regarding this hadith, that حبس من ثبت له أنه مفلس, that a person, that it is legitimate for a judge to imprison that person until he's able to bring off proof. And I mentioned that, so also that ulama mentioned that it is not allowed for a person or it is proven. So there's legitimate proof and proven that that person's claim of bankruptcy is valid. So if the person have made this proof and bring the evidence, then he's not to be locked up, or not to be locked up at all, or if he's locked up, then for him to be released. So if the person bring evidence, then he's to be released. If the person bring the proof that he's broke or bankrupt, then he's not to be locked up. Then so that's concerning the mention لا خلاف بين العلماء أن من ثبت إعساره وإفلاسه أنه لا يجوز حبسه. So that there's no khilaf between ulama regarding the person who can prove legitimately that he's bankrupt or broke, then he's not to be imprisoned. So in today's time, so they mentioned that, but it goes back to the person bringing of proof. What's that proof? What is taken as proof that a person is bankrupt? So in today's, so they mentioned, the ulama have mentioned regarding that either the people that he owes, his creditors, they can say, they can somewhat admit and confess that he is bankrupt. So they can somewhat, so by their confession and admittance that he is bankrupt, then that is taken. That he's actually bankrupt and broke by way of his creditors who are saying this. So that's one way. And in today's a second way, shahada, a shuhud, where you have, he can bring witnesses to prove that, to witness that he is bankrupt. So bringing witness in, producing witnesses to make admit that he is bankrupt, then that's of another method. And it mentioned also qara'in al-wadhi'a, and also they mentioned qara'in, other type of sources that can be used. So the person can use other sources to bring off, to prove of this. So in today's time, that's sometimes a person that may claim bankruptcy, and they can do this legitimately with the state. And the state will give him some form of documentation to prove that he is bankrupt. So he'd have some form of document by way of the state, the authorities, that this person is said to be of a bankruptcy claim, and that he's actually bankrupt. So that also is a form of proof by way of the state. So these are things the person can use as proof, and if the person submit those proof, bring forth those proof, produce these proof that he's bankrupt and is legitimate, then he is not to be arrested or locked up, and if he's locked up, he's to be released. Then I mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in his book by stating regarding that his case regarding some lenience to the person who's bankrupt or the person who's broke and in difficulty. I mentioned وَإِنْ كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ. What I mentioned, وَإِنْ كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ, is the person that is a person who having a form of a person having difficulty, a person has difficulties, experiencing adversities. They mention فَنَظْرَةٌ إِلَى مَيْسَرَةٍ. Then one should wait things out until he's able to can fulfill his obligation. So give him respite until he's able to can fulfill his responsibility. Where things become easier for him, then so give him that respite. So that's concerning, they mentioned that is a person in the state of, as mentioned, وَإِنْ كَانَ ذُو عُسْرَةٍ, that a person that is in this state of difficulty, then respite is given to him. And he can prove this, then he's to be given respite. He's to be given respite until, or some leniency, until he's able to can pay off his debt. So they mentioned that regarding, so that's concerning of those matters regarding what is mentioned regarding such a situation. They mentioned that of those who have mentioned that you might find sometime in some of the courts that they can see it as the person who claim bankruptcy, that the person is locked away. That person, if he claim bankruptcy, and he'll be locked away. They mentioned that is going against the ayah, and also that against rahma wal khawf min Allah. So for the person not to be locked away, but given respite, and not to come overly harsh upon the person. So locking the person away, then this is not to be done. Not to be done, except in the case of the person who has the ability and he choose not to pay his debt, and he's delaying paying off his debt and putting off paying off his debt. Then such a person is dealt with separately. So from this are those of the ahkam that are taken from this. They mention regarding of the fawahid that can be taken from this they mentioned, and the fawahid that we'll read concerning the fawahid from Sheikh Subayhi. So from Sheikh Subayhi in his explanation or the explanation of Bulugh Al-Maram, he mentioned فوائد الحديث. دل الحديث على التحريم مطلق الغني, that it shows regarding the hadith shows regarding it is haram for a person to delay paying off his debt. The person مطلق لا يكون إلا بعذر, and the person to do so, for a person to delay paying, he must have a valid udhr. So the person who delaying of his debt, then the person should have a valid excuse. So it is haram for one to delay paying off one's debt, to postpone, put off paying off the debt as agreed upon, except the person has a valid excuse. But if he does so wrongfully, then he is falling into ithm, and that is oppressing others, and that's oppressing of the person that who that is this creditor. Then I mentioned the second of the evidence it mentioned regarding concerning, it shows regarding the person that who has the ability, then the person should pay off his debt. So by this, the one who has the ability, then he should pay his debt. The one who has the ability to pay off his debt, then he should do so according as soon as he's able, or according to what has been agreed at the time that had been given to him. And also it shows regarding the person who is his creditor, that the person is not paying him and is able, then that person, he can raise that matter to others and speak about that by way that he can raise it by way of the courts, or those who can intervene, so it becomes for the person that the person is allowed shar'an, Islamically, that he can raise his matters to others and for them to intervene for the person to receive what is his due rights. And also he could leave the person who delay paying of his debt, he could be punished for this, that he could be punished for doing of this. As for the person who is in debt and unable to pay his debt, is legitimately unable to pay his debt and is bankrupt, then that person is not to be punished. So the one who's fakir, la yubiya, that a person expose a person, and also for the person to be punished for not being able to pay off his debt. So that's concerning the first hadith and what is mentioned regarding that particular hadith. The next hadith that is mentioned, the hadith Abu Sa'id al-Khudri mentioned, and Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, as we mentioned the hadith before, قال أصيب رجل في عهد رسول عليه السلام في ثمر, a person that was affected regarding concerning his purchase. So the person who bought of fruits, but I mentioned that فكثر دينه, but the person then he became bankrupt, or the person then has of debts, lots of debts to be paid because of his bankruptcy, but he still have a lot of debts to be paid. Then I mentioned the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the people, فَتَصَدَّقُوا عَلَيْهِ, that you should give him charity. So for you to offer him of charity. They mentioned regarding concerning the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that so the person who have purchased something, but then later fall into bankruptcy, and he has debts that are outstanding debts to be paid. Then the Prophet ﷺ said regarding this person, when this came to his attention, regarding this person mentioned that the people, that they should tasaddaq, that they should give charity to this person. I mentioned that from zakat, that a person then is deserving of zakat, but because he said to be one who's in debt and bankrupt, a fakir. So because it is mentioned, tasaddaqu alayh, that you should give him charity. The ulama mentioned that he's deserving of even zakat al-wajibah. He become of those who are deserving of zakat. They mentioned that the people, the people that when they gave the charity and it was gathered, that he stated that it wasn't sufficient enough to pay off his debts. So when the people did give charity and it was gathered, it still wasn't enough to pay all of his debt. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he said regarding to the mention, خُذُوا مَا وَجَدْتُمْ. So as for the people who are his creditors, he mentioned, خُذُوا مَا وَجَدْتُمْ. Take from what is there, وَلَيْسَ لَكُمْ إِلَّا ذَلِكَ, and do not exceed this. Then you take what is there, and that is what you're deserving. So from this hadith that they have mentioned, that as we state, that this hadith mentioned a person that fell into bankruptcy. The person fell into bankruptcy where he had bought some things, fruits, bought some things, but then after buying this, then the person that he fell into bankruptcy. So it mentioned regarding concern that the Prophet ﷺ said, no, still with this, because of him being in a state of bankruptcy, for the people to still assist him by giving him charity, and of that they mention from zakat al-amwal, give the person from a zakat so that he can pay off his debts. But when it was given to him of charity, it still wasn't sufficient for him to pay off his debts. Then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, as for his creditors, take what he has, and that is enough. Take what he has, and don't exceed this. Then I mentioned Rawahu Muslim. So I mentioned the hadith here. As for Taqrir the hadith in the Muslim, also Ahmed in his Musnad, Abu Dawood in his Sunan, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Nasahi, Ibn Jarud, Tahawi fi Shar al-Mushkil, Ibn Hibban, wal-Hakim, wal-Bayhaqi. So this hadith is found in these books. Muslim, but also Ahmed, Abu Dawood, Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Jarud, Tahawi in his book called Shar al-Mushkil, Ibn Hibban, Hakim, wal-Bayhaqi. So these are the sources that I've mentioned this particular hadith. So the hadith is Sahih, as the hadith is mentioned in Sahih Muslim. So they consider to be hadith which is Sahih, as the hadith is mentioned in Sahih al-Muslim. As for the masail of this hadith that have been mentioned, so this particular hadith of the masail first, of the masail of the hadith, it mentioned that man aflasa wa laysa lahu min al-mal, that a person who is said to be bankrupt and he does not have any wealth, he's bankrupt, he's broke. Then ما يكفيه لقاء, so he doesn't have enough wealth for him to pay off his debt. So the person is bankrupt and doesn't have enough sufficient wealth to pay off his debt. They mentioned regarding the person, regarding this particular case concerned at لا خلاف, that there's no خلاف بين العلماء أنه يلزم عليه أن يبيع ما زاد عن حاجته وحاجة من يعول. That they mentioned the person who is in this case, that there's no khilaf between ulama, that a person that he should sell off what is beyond he should sell off beyond what he needs for himself and his family. So the person who is into the case, then it comes upon the person that he should sell off the extra things that he has beyond that which is for his need and also for his family. So they mention that's concerning that, and also that the person that sadaqah can be given to such a person, that also this person sadaqah is deserving of sadaqah, which is a zakat. So this person is deserving of sadaqah or zakat. And also that for those who are his creditors, that for them to only take from what is found from what is his property, from what is of the wealth that he has, that they should only take from this and not go beyond this. So from the hadith, that they mentioned that of the things that a person that is not to sell, of the things of his need that he's not allowed to sell, they mention that, and people cannot take from these things, so things that he should not sell off to pay off his debt, and also things that his creditors cannot take. They mention things regarding his thiyab, his clothing, his thing that he needs regarding basic of the things in his house, regarding his furniture, things in his house that he needs, things, his food that he needs regarding for himself and his family, so things for him to sustain himself and his family, those things are not to be taken. So things that are in need, then those things are not to be sold. Also they discuss of those things that are not to be sold, khilaf between ulama, regarding him selling of his property. So for example, if the person have a house that he's living in, is he allowed to sell that house to pay off his debt? Or a person may have, so having a house, is he allowed to sell off this matter? So the person, so the ulama mentioned that the house is not to be sold, but we'll discuss this matter further, that the house generally that are out, if it is what is sufficient for himself and his family, is not to be sold. Then they discuss no for it to be sold or so not to be sold. They discuss regarding concern the person regarding the house, that if the house, he has a large house, he has large with extra space in the house, he has a large house beyond what is that is sufficient for him and his family. So he has what is more than what he needs for him and his family. They mention regarding in that case, then is it allowed for the person to sell that house, use of the money gain from the sale of that out for him to buy a house that is suitable for him and his family, and the other remaining is used to pay his debt. So the ulama mentioned that he take that route. If you have a large enough house, bigger for his need and his family, the house is to be sold. Then he buy a house that is suitable for his family size, and what remain of the extra, then that to be used to pay off his debt. So of the ulama who take off this view, of the ulama who take off this view, and I mentioned that qawl, that the qawl of the Ahnaf and also the Hanabila, Wajl Shafi'iyah, and they mentioned that Nasal Hanabila, that the person have a large enough house. So the Hanabila, Nasal Hanabila, if the person have a large enough house, then the person should sell that house, buy a size that is suitable for him and his family, and the rest of that money to be used to pay off his debt. As for if you have a house already that is sufficient for him and his family, is not to be sold. And that's the view taken by the Madhab al-Hanafiya, the Hanabila, and Wajl Shafi'iyah. But if the house is a large house, large enough, a big size house that's beyond what his family need, then to be sold, and he buys something which is sufficient, and the rest pay off his debt. And of the ulama mentioned, so that's concerning that what is mentioned by some of the ulama. They discuss another matter, that is the hakim to yujbir, to force that person who has this debt that he owes to others. That should can the hakim force that person who is able to go and work to pay his debt, to seek employment to pay off his debt? Is he to force him to do so? Yujbir. So a discussion between the fuqaha. So the discussion is, هل الحاكم, is the hakim and yujbirhu, to force this person and iktasab liqada dayni, that force him that he should seek employment to pay off his debt. On this matter, you find jumhur of the ulama la yujbirhu, that they mentioned the jumhur of the ulama take the position, so majority of the ulama take the position that the judge should not force this person to seek employment and to go on work to earn some form of earnings so he can pay his debt. So they mentioned he's not to be forced to find employment. And I mentioned that, but rather they should wait until he's able can pay. Because now he's unable, he's going through a difficult time, but one should wait until he's able, things become easier for him, but he should not force to seek employment. So that's the view of taken by, we said, Jumhur of the ulama. And I mentioned the Prophet ﷺ, they said the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, خُذُوا مَا وَجَدْتُمْ وَلَيْسَ لَكُمْ إِلَّا ذَلِكَ, that you are not, take what you find, and you are not deserving more than this. So I said the Prophet ﷺ did not, in the hadith, did not command and instruct the person that he should seek a form of employment to pay off his debt. But from what he has, take, and what is not there, then leave it. But he was not, the Prophet ﷺ did not instruct the person or mention the person that he should seek employment. So they said that he didn't mention this. So the judge should not force the person to seek employment to pay off his debt. So I said, no, that's the call taken by Jumhur of the ulama on this matter. Then I mentioned that ذهب بعض السلف الحنابلة في صحيح عندهم وابن حزم, that I mentioned أنه يجبر على كسب, that of the ulama, the Hanabila, Ibn Hazm, other of the ulama, who take the position that the judge can force that person to seek employment and to work. So he can use this earnings to slowly pay off his debt to his creditors. So as the person and the Hakim should not allow that those creditors that not to be paid and lose off their money. So they mentioned if the Hakim should force the person to seek employment, to pay off, to help him pay off his debt, so the people that they can slowly gain of what they're deserving. So that's concerned the second view taken by the ulama. And I mentioned that the second view, that of those who are mentioned, that's the more correct view, and of those who mention that, the matter go back to the Hakim, to the judge, to make that judgment call, to rule whether he forced the person to seek employment or not. So overall, I mentioned that it can be done depending on the situation and the circumstance. So I mentioned لا بأس أن يرجع هذا إلى اجتهاد الحاكم. So whether the person is forced or not, it goes back to the judge to make that call, for the judge to make that decision and make that call. So with that, inshallah ta'ala, it discussed concerning that some of the masahil that relates to the person who said to be bankrupt based upon what is mentioned by these hadith regarding of some of the action that can be taken or not be taken against him. So with this, inshallah ta'ala, that will end. But with this, they mentioned regarding concerning of the so those are the masail that relates to this particular hadith. So that, inshallah ta'ala, will end this discussion and continue next session with the remaining hadith that is mentioned in this discussion that is mentioned here. So that, inshallah ta'ala, billahi ta'ala tawfiq wa hadila sabil wal akhir alhamdulillah.